After my brother got into a car accident, he insisted, loudly and with absolute certainty, that he was a time traveler from the future. The very next day, he stormed into my office and in front of everyone, pointed at my aloof, unsmiling boss and shouted, "Brother-in-law!" I was mortified. Especially since I'd just been scolded by Herbert Graham for a major screw-up at work. I was already skating on thin ice. One more slip, and I'd be jobless. Panicking, I rushed over to drag my brother out before he made things worse, but he clung to Herbert Graham's waistband like a madman and shouted, "You haven't confessed yet? What are you, a ninja?" He didn't stop there. "You literally tattooed her name on your back. What the hell are you waiting for?" Everything he said sounded like gibberish to me. I didn't understand a single word. Herbert Graham, on the other hand, looked absolutely livid. His face was flushed red with anger. That night, I sat at my desk, heart sinking, quietly drafting my resignation letter. Then I accidentally caught a glimpse of the messages Herbert Graham had sent to my brother. "How many kids do your sister and I have in the future? Do they look more like her or me? Divorce crisis. Is someone trying to seduce her? Who is it? Who's that bastard?" Welcome to History channel. Subscribe to follow all our latest adventures. Story begins. I had just stepped out of my boss's office after a brutal scolding when my mom called. "Mom," I answered wearily. "Has Colin Channing woken up yet?" Colin's my younger brother. Senior in high school this year. 2 nights ago, on his way back from evening study hall, he got into a bike accident. He'd been unconscious in the hospital ever since. If I hadn't been so worried about him, I wouldn't have accidentally sent a critical message meant for a client straight to my boss. Hence the yelling. "He's awake. He's awake," my mom said, voice high with emotion. "The doctor's doing a checkup now." I pressed further. "How is he? Can he see? Hear? Does he recognize you guys?" She went quiet for 2 seconds. My heart jumped. "Wait. Is he blind? Deaf?" No, she said quickly. "He's not deaf or blind, it's just, he keeps saying really strange things." A burst of noise came through the phone before I could ask what she meant. Then my brother's voice rang out, excited and clear. "Am I the chosen one?" "Mom, are you on the phone with Sis? Let me talk to her." A few seconds of rustling later, his voice came straight into my ear. "Sis, listen, I'm back from the year 2035. You guys have to do exactly what I say. We're gonna get rich, I swear." I ended the call with a deadpan expression. Does this idiot think I have time for this? The company's cash flow had been in trouble the past few days, and Herbert Graham, my boss, was in a dark mood. The whole office felt like it was under a storm cloud. When I got back to my desk, my coworkers shot me sympathetic looks. One of the closer ones leaned in and whispered, "Joey, you okay?" I blinked. "Yeah. Why?" She gave me a thumbs up. "You're tough. After getting chewed out by Hell Graham for that long, you didn't even flinch." Hell Graham. That was the nickname they gave Herbert behind his back. No sooner had she said it than she glanced over my shoulder and went dead silent. Herbert Graham had just stepped out of his office. He was tall, broad-shouldered, and perfectly proportioned. Every feature on his face looked like it had been drawn with precision. Even the most basic suit somehow looked stark and ascetic on him, like he'd walked out of a minimalist designer ad. He was on a call as he walked toward the elevator. When the doors slid shut behind him, the tension in the office instantly dropped. "Looks like Hell Graham fixed the cash flow issue," someone said. "He really goes all in." "No kidding. He pushes us hard, but he's even harder on himself." "Hey Joey, didn't you go to the same college as Hell Graham? He was your senior, right?" Just like that, the spotlight was back on me. I nodded. "So was he always like this back in college?" someone asked. I hesitated. "Like what?" They thought for a second, then replied, "Cold. No warmth." Herbert Graham had been my senior. He was also the president of the Student Volunteer Association I briefly joined. But I didn't know him well. Barely spoke to him actually. Just enough to say we weren't strangers, but definitely not friends. So I didn't feel comfortable commenting on what he used to be like. I just laughed it off and went to the break room with my mug. The others kept chatting outside, but my mind drifted. In truth, the answer to their question had flashed through my mind right away. Was Herbert Graham a cold person even in college? I didn't think so. And not just back then. I glanced around. Our company was barely more than a startup. Bare bones, scrappy. Yet the break room was always fully stocked. After an intern fainted from low blood sugar, someone had cleared out a shelf just to keep it filled with chocolate and candies in every flavor. The women's restroom always had emergency sanitary products. Whenever there were client dinners, Herbert Graham either went alone or, if he absolutely needed someone, chose a male employee to accompany him. None of these things were flashy. Most people never even noticed. But I did. Because they showed something. Herbert Graham had been shouldering everything by himself from the start. Quietly. Steadily. Trying in his own way to protect the people under him. Herbert Graham returned before the end of the workday, looking unusually relaxed. A coworker whispered, "Looks like the crisis is over. We might actually get to leave on time." That was an understatement. Moments later, we all received a text. Paid day off tomorrow. The office went quiet for 2 whole seconds, then erupted. I love our boss. I love my skyrocket tech. I love Hell Graham. The last shout rang out just as Herbert Graham stepped out of his office. The guy who said it froze mid-cheer, mouth still wide open, then silently buried his head in the paperwork in front of him. Herbert Graham didn't say a word. He just gave us a faint glance and said, "Call it early." Then his eyes paused on me. I straightened up immediately. Got it, boss. And just like that, the boss was out the door. No reason for us worker bees to stick around. I started packing up to head out, but as I stood waiting for the elevator behind Herbert Graham, my phone buzzed. It was my mom. "Your brother's been discharged. He says he's on his way to pick you up." "He's what?" I frowned. "Where is he now?" "Should be near your office by now," she replied, a bit flustered. Apparently, while she was signing the release forms, Colin Channing had bolted from the hospital on his own and left her a note. My vision darkened. "All right. I'll take him home," I said before hanging up. The elevator arrived. I stepped in right behind Herbert Graham. It was a small space, and though we stood in opposite corners, the confined air made everything feel just a bit too close. I stared at his back, lost in thought. Then came his voice. Completely unexpected. "Your boyfriend's picking you up?" Boyfriend? I blinked. Thinking back to the call I just had, I realized he'd misunderstood. I rushed to clarify. "No, my younger brother." The faint crease between his brows eased almost imperceptibly. He gave a small nod. "Ah, my mistake." Then silence again. I fixed my eyes on the floor number display and watched as it crept toward one. When the doors opened, the first thing I saw was someone wrapped in bandages, craning his neck and scanning the lobby. "Colin Channing." I strode toward him. "What are you doing at my company?" Sis. Colin's face lit up. "You suddenly look so young." "I'm still getting used to it." "Are you losing it?" He leaned in conspiratorially, voice low and secretive. "Sis, I have to tell you something. I'm from the year 2035. I stared at him with grave concern. Did the doctor recommend psych evaluations at all? They just let him out like this? Seeing that I didn't believe him, he started panicking, scratching his head, desperate for a way to prove himself. That's when his gaze landed on someone behind me, the very man speaking to the receptionist. His eyes lit up. "Wait. Isn't that?" He pointed right at Herbert Graham, his voice caught in his throat. I grabbed his hand. "Don't point. That's my boss." Before I could finish warning him, a deafening shout exploded in my ear. "Brother-in-law!" Colin yanked free and sprinted toward Herbert Graham. Then he hugged him. Full-on wrapped his arms around Herbert's torso and started slapping him enthusiastically on the back. "Bro, We got in that accident after drinks, remember? Did you time travel with me back to 2025? I've been so scared alone. Thank God you're here with me. Then, without warning, he cupped Herbert Graham's face and kissed him. Smack dab on the cheek. I was stunned into stone. So were the co-workers who had just exited the elevator and witnessed the whole thing. Herbert Graham stood frozen, blinking at Colin, then turning to look at me. He quickly recovered, pulling himself out of Colin's grasp, struggling to retain some last shred of composure. Through clenched teeth he asked, "Would you mind telling me, who exactly are you?" "Me." Colin looked proud. "Colin Channing." Then he pointed right at me. "Your wife's little brother. The most loyal brother-in-law you've got." Every eye in the lobby swiveled and landed squarely on me. My face burning, I yanked at the back collar of Colin Channing's shirt, trying to drag him out of the lobby. But he was already 17 now. And strong. Too strong. He shook me off effortlessly, then turned around and sat straight down on the floor, latching himself onto Herbert Graham's leg like a human barnacle. My co-workers were frozen in place, gawking in disbelief. No one remembered they were supposed to be heading home. Someone even pulled out their phone and began recording. I'd had enough. "Colin Channing. What the hell is wrong with you? You don't understand," he shouted back, his voice cracking. His eyes were red, and for a moment, he actually looked more wrong than me. I woke up out of nowhere, back here. 3 months before my senior year finals. Do you think I can read those textbooks now? You expect me to just sit the exams like nothing happened? It's a death sentence. Mom doesn't believe me. You don't believe me. No one does. You have no idea how close I am to falling apart. He let out a raw, frustrated scream, then turned back to Herbert Graham, almost wailing. "Don't you recognize me, brother-in-law? How come we got in the same car crash, but only I traveled back in time?" Herbert Graham, at long last, seemed to make sense of the chaos unfolding around him. He glanced at me. Then at Colin. His face twisted into something halfway between disbelief and utter confusion. Then, he asked the question we were all thinking. "What did you just call me?" "Brother-in-law," Colin replied seriously. "You married my sister in 2031. Robin Graham was born in 2032, man. That kid is a total menace. Like a miniature storm in a tutu, whoa." I slapped a hand over his mouth. "Say one more word, and we'll die here together." Colin shut up. Apparently, even he could tell staying alive was the better option here than narrating a sci-fi rom-com at my place of work. I laughed. Manically. I was on the verge of a breakdown. I turned, tossed out a half-coherent apology to Herbert Graham, and made a beeline for the exit. Colin scrambled up to follow me, but he was still recovering from the accident. Dizzy, unstable and reckless, he reached out to steady himself, and grabbed Herbert Graham's belt, and with one swift tug, pulled his dress shirt halfway out from his pants. Colin gasped. Sorry, future brother-in-law." Ever polite, he even tried to tuck the shirt back in. Herbert Graham stared at him, lips twitching with disbelief, then, inexplicably, laughed. A dry, incredulous huff. He took a step back. I stood at the entrance, watching the disaster unfold. I wanted to laugh too, but I couldn't. Then Colin squinted at Herbert's back. "Holy crap," he shouted. "You have a tattoo on your lower back." Herbert had remained composed through all of this, being tackled, kissed, called names, but that made his expression finally shift. He quickly slipped on his suit jacket and said nothing, but Colin was still staring wide-eyed, as if he'd just uncovered a conspiracy. "You already had my sister's name tattooed on you back in 2025? And you didn't confess till 2030? What are you, a ninja?" Boom. A figurative lightning bolt struck me right there in the lobby. My brain went blank. Why was Colin saying all this insane crap in my office? Why was he trying to destroy the one stable thing I had going? My job. Was this revenge? Did he remember that one time I made him eat dog poop when we were kids? Everything buzzed in my ears. Herbert Graham was staring at Colin, clearly stunned. His gaze shifted to me for a moment, and then quickly flicked away. But not before I saw it. He was blushing. It started at his ears and spread down his neck, flooding his face like wildfire. That cold, emotionless expression of his suddenly cracked, just enough to make him look human. Which meant I was doomed. He was furious. Absolutely furious. And before he fired me, I figured, might as well get ahead of the disaster. I collapsed on the spot. Eyes rolled up. Limbs limp. Thunk. Sis. What happened? Joey. Joey Channing. Everyone scrambled to help me into a chair. Herbert Graham's voice was tense, urgent. I'll get the car. Stay with her. Of course. Every boss's nightmare. An employee collapsing on company property. The moment he turned to leave, I opened my eyes. One coworker muttered, stunned. Please tell the boss thank you, I said briskly, then grabbed Colin Channing by the ear and made a run for it like the 100-meter dash. We dove into a taxi parked by the curb. Drive. Please. I barked at the driver. As the company building shrank in the rearview mirror, I finally let out a long breath and slumped back into the seat. Alive. Somehow. Colin sat in silence the whole ride. Didn't say a word. The moment we got home, he bolted to his room and locked the door. Mom looked confused. What's up with him? Mom, I said, dead serious. You should probably hide anything dangerous in the house. I'm worried I might not stop myself from turning into an only child. She didn't hesitate. Immediately headed to the kitchen to collect the knives. I walked to Colin's door and knocked. Come out. You owe me an explanation. His voice came through, trembling. You wouldn't believe me anyway. I'm sorry, sis. Really, I didn't mean to. I swear. Just, cool off. Let's talk when you're not mad. I let my hand fall to my side, drained. Utterly exhausted. Like a ghost, I drifted back to my room and sat in silence. Everything that had happened at work today played back in my mind. It was all so absurd. Colin had said Herbert Graham had a tattoo of my name. That he loved me. That we'd get married one day. Ridiculous. Laughable. Back in college, my first love had been someone Herbert Graham introduced me to. He couldn't possibly. I sighed and opened my laptop. Might as well get started on that resignation letter. Just in case. As the screen lit up, my phone buzzed with notifications. It was Colin's Instagram. During finals, Mom had taken his phone. He must have logged in on my computer while attending online classes from my room. I clicked in to log him out, but the top message caught my eye. Graham. Are you Colin Channing? Future brother-in-law reporting in. Future bro-in-law. Haha. Can't believe your account still exists after all these years. Good thing I memorized your handle. Graham, the tattoo on my lower back. How do you know about that? I blinked. Leaned in closer. Read that message 3 times over. Future brother-in-law reporting in. I'm from 2035. We used to go to the bathhouse together all the time. Of course I know what's on your back. Do you believe me, bro? Shaking unheard at JPG. A long pause. Then Herbert Graham replied with a single word. Yes. At the same time, from the room next door, I heard Colin shriek in victory. Finally. Finally someone believes me. I stared at the screen, stunned. I swear I hadn't meant to invade his privacy. But this was Herbert Graham. My boss. Mr. Cold as Ice himself. How could I not be curious? While I sat there dazed, the messages kept flowing. Graham. Are your sister and I really going to get married? Future brother-in-law reporting in. Of course. I carried her onto the wedding car myself. Graham. How many kids will we have? Will they look more like me or her? Future brother-in-law reporting in. Just one. Robin Graham. She looks like you. Bro, when my sister gave birth, she almost bled out. You sobbed like a baby at the hospital and swore she'd never have to go through that again. Silence again from Graham. Then. Future brother-in-law reporting in. You two were really happy, you know. If it hadn't been for that man, you wouldn't have gotten divorced. Graham's reply came instantly. Graham. Divorced? What happened? Who was the man? Did someone seduce her? Who is that bastard? That's when I started doubting whether the person behind the screen was really Herbert Graham. He couldn't possibly say something like that, right? I sat there, staring at their chat, unsure what to think. I recognized every word. But put together the whole thing made no sense. Future brother-in-law reporting in. I don't really know the details. I think it had something to do with her first love. Future bro-in-law. Can't you just confess sooner? Build your relationship early. When that stupid first love shows up, he won't stand a chance. Graham. But, your sister doesn't love me. Future brother-in-law reporting in. Says who? She still keeps your old student ID photo from college. I shot to my feet. Rushed out the room. Kicked open Colin's door. Snatched his phone. Long pressed that message and hit unsend without missing a beat. All in one breathless motion. Colin stared at me from the bed. Curled up like a squirrel. Sis, what the hell? How do you know I kept Herbert Graham's ID photo? I grabbed him by the collar. You were snooping through my stuff? Colin blinked once. Then it hit him too. You were reading my DMs with Herbert Graham? After half an hour of intense discussion, Colin Channing and I sat across from each other in heavy silence. I had to admit, I believed him now. I really believed his story about time travel. Still, I wasn't ready to let it go. What's the winning lottery number for the next draw? I asked. Colin gave me a flat look. Do you think I'd actually know that? What's the essay prompt for this year's high school finals? Forgot. All right then, I said sighing. I believe you're from the future. Colin blinked. Huh. With your brain? Forgetting all that sounds just about right. After making him solemnly promise not to message Herbert Graham again, I finally dragged my exhausted body back to my room. My steps were shaky. My will to live, thinner than ever. Collapsing backward onto the bed, I stared up at the ceiling. My mind was a mess. Herbert Graham loves me? Me. That was just absurd. The physical fatigue soon overwhelmed the mental chaos. It didn't take long before sleep swallowed me whole. And then I dreamed of college and everything that came with it. Back when I first started university, the only club I joined was the Student Volunteer Association. Other than that, I mostly kept to myself, often retreating to the quiet corners of the library. One afternoon, after downing too many cold drinks, my period came early. I stained my pants. Completely unprepared, I hunched over the desk, frozen with panic. That's when I heard someone knock on the edge of the table. By the time I looked up, the guy had already walked away. Left behind was his jacket and, tucked discreetly on top of it, a sanitary pad. There was no name, no message. Just kindness. Except, a student ID had slipped from his jacket pocket. That's how I found out his name and major. Edward Miller. Same department as the Volunteer Association president, Herbert Graham. Rumor had it they were even roommates. I laundered the jacket and brought it to the club office, asking Herbert if he could return it for me. As always, Herbert Graham's expression was unreadable. He took the clothes, gave a small nod and said nothing more. But from that moment, I started secretly paying attention to Edward. I memorized his class schedule. Asked around to see if he was seeing anyone. Loitered near the basketball courts hoping to accidentally run into him. Eventually, I worked up the courage to ask Herbert about his likes and dislikes. Surprisingly, the ever-stoic Herbert talked to me more that afternoon than he ever had before. At the end of it, he asked me directly, "Do you like him?" Caught off guard, I nodded without thinking. He paused. "Want my help?" Herbert Graham. Ultimate wingman. 2 months later, Edward and I started dating. He was my first love. I cherished him. I took it seriously. And I won't lie, at first, it was sweet. Really sweet. But that sweetness always came with exhaustion. Edward and I were polar opposites. He was a classic extrovert, thrived in social chaos, loved crowds, always helping people. The day I told him how we met, he looked at me blankly. He didn't remember. He'd helped too many people. I was just one of many. I, on the other hand, was low energy by nature. Trying to force myself into his vibrant, overwhelming world drained me dry. We broke up on good terms. Eventually, the messages stopped too. I labeled Herbert Graham, the roommate of my ex, and distanced myself. I even left the volunteer association to keep things clean. The next day, I slept in until the sun was high in the sky. The work chat was dead silent. I could guess what was going on. Someone had probably made a new group without me and Herbert, and they were probably having the time of their lives dissecting yesterday's chaos. I got up to wash up. Just as I stepped out of my room, Colin emerged from his. "Sis, where are you going today?" "Out with Kiki Brown," I replied. Kiki was my best friend. With everything swirling in my head, I needed my personal strategist to help me sort through it all. But to my surprise, the moment I said her name, Colin's face turned suspiciously red. I narrowed my eyes. "What? Can I come too?" "No." I shut him down instantly. He trailed after me as I finished my makeup, persistent as a mosquito. I finally snapped. "Give me one good reason." He paused, face suddenly solemn. "If I tell you, will you believe me?" I nodded slowly. He drew in a deep breath. "In the future, Kiki Brown is my wife." Splash. I threw my cup of water straight into his face. "You? Marry my best friend? In what universe do you think you deserve her?" Colin sat there, drenched and silent. After an entire afternoon talking with Kiki Brown over coffee, I felt much lighter. She said, "Why overthink it? The future is uncertain, uncontrollable. You just have to let it unfold. Worrying about things that haven't happened yet will only drain you." And honestly, she was right. The next morning, I headed to work with a much steadier mindset. Sure, I still caught my coworkers sneaking glances at me. Some subtle, some not so much. But once Herbert Graham walked into the office, the focus shifted quickly. Their curiosity zeroed in on him instead, particularly on his lower back. Their gazes practically burned holes through his shirt, clearly hoping to get a glimpse under the hem. Herbert Graham, as always, looked composed, controlled, unbothered. Meanwhile, I was a wreck. All day, I tried to avoid being alone with him. I even went so far as to avoid making eye contact. When evening came and I finished my tasks, I packed up to leave, only to get a message from him. "Wait for me. I have something to talk to you about." I had just stood up. I sat back down like a rock. He came out not long after and gestured toward the elevator. I followed him in. No one else was inside. We stood shoulder to shoulder. Eventually, I broke the silence. "Is there something work-related you need to tell me, boss?" He turned to glance at me. "No. It's personal." He pressed the button for B1. "I'll drive you home. We can talk on the way." Herbert lived in the apartment complex next to mine. Walking distance. I climbed into his passenger seat. Dazed. I was terrified. Terrified he'd bring up the ridiculous things Colin said. Terrified that everything would shift. That our simple working relationship would sour into something weird. Thankfully, Herbert Graham was clearly more rational than Colin Channing. He drove steadily, easing into the evening traffic. I figured whatever he had to say, he'd be calm about it. Polite. Subtle, maybe. Then came his voice, smooth and quiet over the hum of the car. "You know by now, don't you? I like you." My breath caught. He kept his eyes on the road. What happened with your brother was strange. But I believe him. And since he already blurted everything out, I figured hiding it doesn't make much sense anymore. He glanced at the rearview mirror, just for a second, then returned his gaze to the road. His hands gripped the steering wheel tighter, knuckles going pale. I stared at them surprised. He wasn't as calm as he looked. He was nervous. I tried to keep my voice steady. Since when? When you were a freshman. A faint smile curled at the edge of his lips. You all came to interview for the Student Volunteer Club. It was just a formality, but you looked genuinely nervous. I handed water bottles to every new applicant. You were the only one who said thank you. I blinked. That's it. He chuckled softly. Sounds silly, right? But that's what started it. That's when I began to notice you. My eyes lingered. And the more I looked, the more I liked. My face flushed hot. I picked at my fingernail. Why did he, of all people, suddenly decide to go full direct confession mode? I turned my face to the window and cracked it open slightly. The cold air helped me gather my thoughts. Thank you, I finally said. He paused, then smiled again, eyes on the road. There was another time, at the library. You looked unwell, curled over a desk. I brought you something, and a jacket I borrowed from my roommate. He glanced at me. Seems like you remember that? I nodded. I do. After my breakup with Edward Miller, he dated a few others. Meanwhile, I buried myself in coursework. At some point, we ended up reconnecting. Just as friends. We chatted easily, and one day we talked about the library, our so-called first encounter. That's when Edward blinked and said, "Yeah, that was my jacket, but I wasn't the one who gave it to you." He'd said it plainly. Herbert borrowed it from me. And that was when I realized my first love had been built on a misunderstanding. From then on, my feelings toward Herbert Graham became complicated. Did I like him? Not exactly. But somehow, I always noticed him more than others. My gaze lingered a little longer. A little softer. He rarely spoke to me. And when our eyes met by accident, he always looked away too quickly. For a while, I thought Herbert Graham didn't like me at all. So I buried whatever little affection I had. Quietly. After I gave him my answer, he went silent for a moment. The car crawled forward in rush hour traffic, stopping and starting until we hit a long red light. The silence inside the car grew heavy. Then, just as the light turned green and he hit the gas, he spoke again. I thought you didn't know. And because of that, I let myself hope. I stiffened. His meaning hit me square in the chest. I twisted my fingers, heart pounding. He glanced at me. Don't be nervous. I'm not expecting anything. You don't owe me a reply. I just wanted you to know. That's it. Once this ride ends, you can forget everything I said. At work, we'll go back to how things were. Back to how things were? Maybe he could do that. After all, he'd hidden it perfectly for years. But me? I couldn't. Ever since I got home, I'd been in a daze, my mind floating somewhere far away. Colin Channing walked past me and muttered, "Why do you look like your soul left your body? Did your future brother-in-law confess or something?" The water I just sipped sprayed right out of my mouth. I turned and glared at him. Did you talk to him again? Colin raised both hands in mock innocence. Unjust accusation. That was just a guess. Sis, come on. You're so obvious. He dragged a chair over and sat beside me. I'm just curious. What exactly are you hesitating about? Hesitating? About a lot of things. So many. I was even debating whether I should show up for work tomorrow. Turns out, I was overthinking it. Now that the company's funding issues were resolved, we were all swept up in a whirlwind of urgent deadlines and non-stop work. I didn't even have the brain space to think about romance or drama. Every day, it was just one task after another, and I ran on autopilot. Even the gossip-prone co-workers no longer lit up when I got summoned to Herbert Graham's office. Their looks were purely sympathetic. When Herbert Graham scolds someone, it's gender-neutral, rank-agnostic, mercy absent. He doesn't yell, doesn't insult, but he has this ability to crush you with psychological pressure. You'll be lying in bed 2 or 3 days later and suddenly bolt upright, slapping yourself. How could I make such a stupid mistake? After a full month of chaos, the project finally made progress. We were granted a temporary breather. Herbert gave us 2 days off. The moment both body and mind relaxed, I got sick. Badly. I spent a day and a half in bed, half dead. My mom had gone back to her hometown, so Colin Channing took time off school to take care of me. I scolded him half-heartedly. Finals are coming up. Colin looked exasperated. Sis, between reading arcane texts and taking care of you, I'd rather take care of you, all right? He was unraveling. Having returned from the year 2035, he'd already been out of school for over a decade. High school material was a foreign language now. He couldn't understand a word of it, much less study. Too tired to argue, I sighed. Get me some water. Then I closed my eyes again, too groggy to think. Colin quietly placed a cup on my nightstand and went to check on the soup simmering in the kitchen. Sis, I'm running down to take out the trash. I'll be right back. He had barely tossed the bag into the bin when he turned and spotted a girl approaching their building. Phone pressed to her ear. Kiki Brown. Why isn't she picking up? She muttered, dialing Joey's number for the fourth time with no answer. Not thinking much of it, she decided to just go up and check on her sick friend in person. Just as she reached the base of the building, a group of workers sitting on the front steps whistled sharply in her direction. Hey, sweetheart, how much? Kiki Brown stopped in her tracks. Bad move. She had a temper and no time for this. What did you just say? She snapped. The man who whistled stood up abruptly, clearly embarrassed. You wanna say that again? Kiki looked him dead in the eye. You drink toilet water or something? She repeated it. Twice. 3 times. You drink toilet water? Toilet water? Toilet water. The guy lunged forward, arm raised. She braced to dodge, when suddenly, a figure barreled into the man from the side, knocking him flat to the ground. Touch my wife and I'll kill you, you piece of trash. Kiki stood frozen. The fight broke out right in front of her, bodies flailing and fists flying. 1 hour later, at the hospital, Colin Channing sat obediently with a bandage wrapped around his head. Kiki had just finished checking the dressing. Seeing that he wasn't too badly hurt, she let out a breath of relief. Colin sniffled. She smells so good. My wife smells amazing. Kiki folded her arms. And why aren't you in school? My sister's sick. I'm home taking care of her. He stared at her without blinking. Why are you looking at me like that? Kiki Brown, you're not hurt, right? Nope, she said, lifting her wrist to show a faint scrape. If I hadn't had to drag your sorry butt out of that mob, I wouldn't even have this. Colin's eyes sparkled. Kiki, you're amazing. She was seriously starting to wonder if the car accident had done something to his brain. Maybe she should call Joey and check. How's your sister doing anyway? Why'd she suddenly come down with such a bad cold? She went to the hospital, got medicine, now she's sleeping. My sister. He trailed off mid-sentence. Then his eyes flew wide open. Crap. I left the stove on. He scrambled to find his phone, only to realize it wasn't with him. Kiki quickly tried Joey's number again. Still no answer. Kiki, Colin said breathlessly, can I borrow your phone? I know someone nearby. He lives close to us. Maybe he can help. I had slept so deeply I felt like I'd dropped off the face of the earth. When I finally woke up, I was drenched in sweat, but the fever had broken and I actually felt better. A cool towel landed gently on my forehead. Wow. Looks like Colin Channing grew a conscience after living an extra 10 years. Taking care of me now, is he? I kept my eyes closed, letting him fuss over me, and shamelessly started giving orders. Give me some water. A second later, a straw was slipped between my lips. I took a few sips. The burning in my throat eased instantly. My entire body ached from sleep, and I didn't have the energy to move. So I kept it going. My arms hurt. Massage them. A warm palm landed on my arm. The massage that followed was surprisingly good. The pressure was just right. Gentle. Steady. Comforting. I sighed in pleasure. Today, my usually annoying little brother was behaving like a perfect, caring sweetheart. Feeling genuinely touched, I reached my hand out blindly, fingers groping until they landed on his head. You brat. You've really earned some points today. Tell me, what do you want as a reward? The second I said it, I froze. Wait. Something felt off. The hair under my fingers. It was soft. Too soft. But my brother had a buzz cut. A buzz cut. It should have felt like porcupine quills, not like silk. My eyes flew open. And locked eyes with Herbert Graham. He was sitting on the edge of my bed. My hand was still on his head. Time stopped. I yanked my hand back like I'd been burned and shrank under the covers in horror. My voice cracked. You. Herbert remained calm, unbothered. He quietly picked up the towel from my forehead, walked over to the basin, rinsed it in cold water, wrung it out, folded it, then returned with the same steady composure. Colin's at the hospital, he said. His voice a touch lower than usual. Hospital? I nearly shot upright, but a wave of dizziness stopped me. Herbert reached out instinctively to steady me. Relax. He's fine. Got into a minor scuffle and took a few hits. Your friend Miss Brown is with him. Everything's handled. He gave me the bullet point version of what happened downstairs. By the time he was done, I was equal parts shocked and furious. But then I blinked and realized something far more important. Why are you here? The real question, the one I should have asked first. Herbert gently laid the cold towel back on my forehead. The chill helped clear some of the fog in my brain. Colin used Miss Brown's phone to call me. Told me you were sick, the stove was still on, and he couldn't come back. He begged me to come check on you. He paused. I live nearby. Perfectly reasonable. I had nothing to argue with. Which meant, the person I just bossed around like a servant, the one I made feed me, massage me, was Herbert Graham? Herbert Graham. And I had patted his head, and asked him what reward he wanted. A tidal wave of mortification drowned me on the spot. My face burned so hot it could fry an egg. I yanked the blanket up and buried my entire head. Thanks, I mumbled. I'm fine now, you can. You know. Please. Just leave. I want to die alone in peace. Reward. His voice cut through my shame-fueled spiral like a blade. What? I peeked out from under the blanket, blinking at him in confusion. He met my eyes, calm but unwavering. You said I could have a reward. Anything I want. I what? I didn't. That was for Colin. But the words died in my throat. His expression was too serious. Too sincere. I couldn't bring myself to correct him. Then what do you want? I asked, heart racing. Herbert leaned forward just slightly, closing the distance between us. I didn't move. Couldn't. My fingers curled into the sheets, my palms already damp with sweat. His breath brushed against the shell of my ear, low and intimate. I want you. My heart skipped a beat. To get better soon. What? I stared at him, stunned. He straightened up and unplugged the charger from my phone at the bedside. Don't leave this plugged in when it's not in use. It's a fire hazard. Then he stood, a subtle curve to his lips, so faint I almost thought I imagined it. Thanks. My heart rate returned to normal. That's when I noticed it. His white shirt was soaked halfway through. He noticed my glance. Got a little wet earlier. When I was pouring your water. The wet fabric clung to him, outlining the sharp lines of his muscles. Don't look. Look away. For the love of God. Look away. I forced my eyes to the ceiling, flopped onto the bed, and tried to think of absolutely nothing. Since your fever's gone down, Herbert Graham said as he slipped on his jacket, I'll head out now. I'm guessing you'd be more comfortable without me hovering around. He grabbed his phone, then paused. If you need anything, don't hesitate to call. I nodded. Thanks. As soon as the door clicked shut behind him, I exhaled deeply, the breath I hadn't realized I was holding finally escaping. My brain immediately descended into chaos. I turned toward the nightstand to grab some water, and that's when I saw it. Herbert Graham's phone. He'd left it right there. I blinked, then reached for it, ready to chase after him. But just as my fingers closed around it, the screen lit up with a new message. The sender's name stopped me cold. Future brother-in-law. It's me. How's my sister doing? A laugh slipped from my lips despite myself. At least he was still concerned about me. The next message came seconds later. Future brother-in-law. It's me. Did you seduce her yet? My sis totally falls for that. I'm going to kill him when he gets home. I heard movement from the living room. Herbert must have realized he left his phone. Panicked, I put the phone back on the nightstand and quickly dove under the covers, shutting my eyes tight. He entered quietly. I could hear his footsteps near the bed. He picked up the phone, but didn't leave right away. Just as I was struggling to keep still, I felt movement beside me. He leaned down. And gently, softly, his lips brushed my cheek. A single kiss. Barely there. He tugged the blanket a little higher over my shoulder, rested a hand briefly on my forehead, then quietly left the room. I opened my eyes. My hand drifted to my chest. Broken. My heart was broken. It was beating so fast it felt like it might explode. The illness came fast and left just as quickly. I only took one extra day off before bouncing back to work like nothing had happened. That evening, I worked late, till about 7 or 8 p.m., finally clearing all the backlog. Stretching, I realized the office was empty. Everyone had gone home. I zoned out in my chair for a minute, then got up to turn off the lights. Passing by Herbert Graham's office, something compelled me to peek inside. He was still there. The lights were off, but I could just make out his figure, slumped over the desk, fast asleep. I stepped inside, stood beside him for a moment, then reached out to gently touch the hand dangling off the edge of the table. The second time I touched him, he stirred. And then he grabbed my fingers. He lifted his head, eyes still hazy with sleep. You're leaving. I nodded. Yeah. How'd you fall asleep in here? He sat up fully, reached for his glasses, and slipped them on. I was waiting for you. He pulled on his coat. I won't interfere with your work. I know you don't want special treatment. And I can't really do anything else. So I figured, I'd just wait. He said all this with the same expression he wore when reprimanding employees. Calm, controlled. But something in his voice was different. Come on. I'll drive you home. I couldn't help myself. There was something I'd wanted to ask for a long time. If you liked me back then, why'd you play matchmaker between me and Edward Miller? Herbert was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, because I didn't think I was good enough. That was the last thing I expected. I looked at him stunned. In my eyes, Herbert Graham had always been extraordinary. Sharp, competent, untouchably impressive. I never imagined he could feel inadequate. I'm not good with words. I come off cold, he said. Edward Miller is different. Charming. Easygoing. Everyone likes him. So when I realized you liked him, it felt right. Like that was how it was supposed to be. I figured if you knew the jacket was for me, you'd thank me and move on. I'd just be another helpful upperclassman to you. Nothing more. You didn't fall for Edward because of one act of kindness. There were other reasons. I looked out the window, at the blur of neon lights. So you assumed I could never love you, and you forced yourself to be generous, sending me into someone else's arms. Yeah, that's what I thought. But I regretted it. He gave a small bitter smile. Watching you date him drove me insane. I turned to look at him, stunned. After a long silence I said, there's something you probably don't know. What's that? I'm really observant. Herbert Graham, I said softly. If you told me from the start that the jacket was from you, I think I would have noticed you. I would have watched you more closely. I would have fallen for you. You're not inferior to Edward Miller. Not even a little. Herbert's grip on the steering wheel tightened. He was silent for a beat, then suddenly pulled the car to the side of the road. Herbert? Sorry, he said, taking off his glasses and leaning forward until his forehead pressed against his wrist on the steering wheel. I can't really drive right now. He stayed like that for a few seconds, then let out a shaky laugh. My heart's beating too fast. I sat beside him, staring down at my hands, too overwhelmed to move. Those words I'd just said? They had drained every last ounce of courage from me. Then, Joey. His voice startled me. You wanna see it? See what? He leaned back in his seat, turned to me, and smiled. The tattoo on my lower back. Weren't you curious? It was my first time at Herbert Graham's home. It wasn't anything like those spotless, cold CEO mansions you see in dramas. His place was warm, tastefully decorated in soft tones, and immaculately clean, but not in a sterile way. It felt lived in. Comfortable. Make yourself at home. Herbert disappeared into the kitchen and returned with a glass of water for me. I held it tightly, fingers white from the pressure. The warm water did nothing to calm my throat or the chaos inside my chest. Herbert stood in front of me, calm and unreadable. Then, slowly, his long fingers moved to the buttons of his shirt. Click, click. He undid them one by one, unhurried, steady. My gaze couldn't help but follow. His collarbone came into view first, then the clean lines of his chest, well-defined but not showy. The warm light caught the curve of muscle and bone, drawing a frame around every inch of him. My face burned. I took a sip of water, pretending to be calm. My legs were shaking. You wanted to see, didn't you? He asked, turning around. I looked up and forgot how to breathe. There, on the left side of his lower back, etched in ink between two small crescent moons, were two delicate letters. My initials. The tattoo wasn't flashy. It rested quietly on his skin, like a secret that had been carved into flesh and soul, and now, he was offering it to me without a trace of reservation. I stared, completely frozen, then slowly reached out. Just before my fingers touched his skin, his hand came up, catching mine, stopping me gently but firmly. Joey Channing, he said, turning his head slightly, voice low and rough. I agreed to let you see it, but I never said you could touch. I couldn't meet his eyes. Humiliation hit me like a wave. I tried to yank my hand back, but Herbert didn't let go. Instead, still holding my wrist, he turned to face me fully. And suddenly, the space between us felt crushingly small. He leaned in, bracing his arms on either side of the couch, caging me in. The crisp scent of him wrapped around me. I had nowhere to run. Now, he said, eyes dark and turbulent, it's your turn to answer my question. Why, he asked, voice low and sharp with tension. Do you still have my student ID photo? My heart jolted. So, he had seen that withdrawn message from Colin. There was no escape under that gaze. It pinned me right where I sat. I dropped my eyes, staring at his collarbone, and whispered, Because I liked you. When I looked up again, I met his eyes. After I broke up with Edward Miller, he told me the truth about the library. That the jacket. It wasn't from him. It was you. I couldn't stop myself after that. I started noticing you. I had a crush on you. But I never planned to tell you. I bit my lip. I was afraid I'd seem frivolous, like I just ended one relationship and jumped into another. So I pulled back, I admitted softly. Then one day at the volunteer club, I found your ID photo lying around. And I don't know. I just kept it. I couldn't bring myself to look at him anymore. Silence stretched between us. The only sounds were the tangled beats of our breath. Then he reached out and gently lifted my chin. His touch was warm. Steady. His eyes, usually so cold and distant, now looked like oceans lit with fire. Deep, burning, full of things he hadn't said. He leaned down and kissed me. At first, it was soft, tentative, almost reverent. Like he wasn't sure I'd let him. But then all the years of restraint unraveled at once. The kiss deepened, grew urgent, consuming. His lips moved over mine with a hunger that had waited too long, with a desperation that stole the air from my lungs. I froze, then melted. My hands moved instinctively, resting on his chest. Under my fingertips, I could feel the heat of his skin, the strong, erratic thump of his heart. The tiny space between us burned hotter with every second. And while all of this was happening, his phone, forgotten on the table, continued lighting up with messages. Future brother-in-law, listen, you have to talk to her about the stupid ex thing. If you don't, it's gonna cause a divorce crisis in the future. For real. She totally kept your photo. She actually cherishes it. My sister's all bark and no bite. Just sweet talk her a little. And don't go subtle with the seduction. She won't get it. Just take it off. Show off those abs. Trust me. Once you guys get married, she's obsessed with your body. Like, can't keep her hands off it. Why aren't you replying? Why isn't my sister home yet? What are you two doing? Why is no one answering? Seriously, I'm getting scared. Please answer. Herbert Graham and I were officially together now. The moment Colin Channing found out, he jumped up at home, practically vibrating with excitement. I knew it. I'm the ultimate wingman. When I get back to 2035, Herbert Graham owes me a full month of meals. But as soon as he said it, the grin faded from his face and his shoulders slumped. Can I even go back? I sat down beside him, patting his arm. It's okay. Even if you can't return, you still have something very important coming up. You've got your high school finals in a week. Colin. He grabbed his backpack and made a beeline for the door. I caught him by the collar. Where are you going? To find Kiki. She promised to help me study. Heh. I frowned. You too. Wait. You weren't serious before, were you? Colin turned to me. Dead serious. Every word I said was true. Kiki Brown will be my wife. I started chasing her in college and didn't stop for 7 years. She finally said yes to marrying me. Then I got in a car accident and landed here. I blinked at him. That still sounded unbelievable. But she's 5 years older than you. You guys weren't even close, right? So what if she's 5 years older? I love her, Colin said boldly. I've loved her for ages. Kiki's way cooler than you. She's smart, funny. In middle school, when some punks were harassing me, she's the one who beat them up. My wife. My amazing wife, he sighed dreamily. Crash. A sudden loud thud came from the front door. Startled, I rushed over and yanked it open. Only to find Kiki Brown standing there, frozen like she'd been struck by lightning. Her eyes darted between me and Colin, who was still in the living room looking like a deer caught in headlights. Her face flushed bright red, and without a word she turned and ran. Colin moved faster than I'd ever seen him. He tore out the door after her. Wife, I mean Kiki. Wait. Let me explain. 3 days before finals, my mom dragged me to the St. Helena Chapel to light a candle for Colin. She was convinced that divine intervention was the key to a passing score. No matter how I argued, she wouldn't budge. Herbert Graham went with me, probably to prevent me from complaining the entire way. The chapel was packed. Finals week always drew in a crowd of anxious students and desperate parents. I knelt at the pew, palms pressed together, muttering half sincerely, "Please, let my idiot brother pass his exams and please don't let him pull another stunt." When I got up, I realized Herbert wasn't beside me anymore. I circled around to the back garden and found him standing beneath the town's famous wishing oak. It was draped in red ribbons, each one holding someone's written wish. Sunlight filtered through the branches, casting dappled light across his shoulders as he raised his hand to tie on a new ribbon. I stepped behind him and wrapped my arms around his waist, whispering, "What are you wishing for?" "A label," he said, turning to smile at me. Then he pointed at the ribbon he'd just tied. On it, written in his neat handwriting, were 2 names, Herbert Graham and Joey Channing. My heart skipped a beat. I looked up and saw my reflection in his eyes. "You don't have to wish for that," I whispered. Rising onto my toes, I pressed a kiss to his lips. "You've already got it." He opened his mouth to respond, but my phone started buzzing in my pocket. Mom's name lit up the screen. Her voice trembled on the other end, choked with panic. "Joey!" "Colin." He passed out at school while picking up his exam slip. "He's at the hospital. He hasn't woken up yet." My brain blanked with a loud buzz. "Don't worry, we're coming now," I said quickly. How is he? Can he see? Hear? Does he recognize you? When we arrived, Colin was still unconscious. The doctors ran every test. His vitals were stable, but no one could explain the cause of his coma. Mom sat beside the bed wiping away tears. Kiki Brown showed up too, face tight with worry. Time dragged on as we waited. Eventually, the sun dipped low, casting a soft orange glow through the hospital window. Then, a twitch. Colin's lashes fluttered. He opened his eyes. He looked around at the white walls, then at all of us gathered around the bed, before locking onto the electronic calendar on the wall. Suddenly, he jolted upright, nearly yanking out his four. But there was no weakness on his face, only wild, unrestrained joy. I'm back. I'm finally back, he shouted, hoarse but ecstatic. Screw 2035 and that horrible class. I'm home. High school. Yes. Glorious high school. Mom reached out with trembling hands to feel his forehead. Colin. Did you hit your head again? He grabbed her hand, eyes sparkling. No, Mom. I didn't lose it. I just took a little trip. Then his gaze found me and Herbert. He gave us a toothy, unapologetic grin. Sis. Brother-in-law. Wow, you guys moved fast, huh? I like it. I like it a lot. Finally, his eyes landed on Kiki Brown, who visibly relaxed the moment he looked at her. A hint of color crept into his ears. Herbert and I exchanged a glance. We both knew it in that moment. The loud, time-traveling, chaos-stirring future Colin Channing had disappeared with that coma. The boy sitting in that bed now was the real Colin, the teenage version, loud, youthful, and very much from this timeline. As Herbert and I stepped out of the hospital room, we heard Colin's voice behind us, echoing loud and indignant. Who scored third from the bottom in the practice test? Was that me? Was I a complete idiot? The end. Thanks for stopping by. Subscribe and hit the notification bell so you don't miss out on any new videos.